Ladies and gentlemen, this is huge. Over 93% of the Supreme Court rulings have been in Trump's favor. Trump has won 93%, and you'll see the number in a second. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. This is an amusing and interesting article from the Brennan Center for Justice. Supreme Court must explain why it keeps ruling in Trump's favor. The headline could be, Democrats and liberal Democrats and opposition to Trump must explain why they're continuously on the unconstitutional wrong side of history. Then you have right here, federal rulings against Trump 94% of the time. The Supreme Court overturns those rulings 93.7% of the time. 93.7% of the time, ladies and gentlemen. This is huge. Okay, this is a Substack article that was cited by the Brennan Center. Supreme Court versus lower court rulings on Trump. Share this everywhere. Trump routinely wins 93.7% of the time, and you have lawyers, attorneys, political scholars, political scientists on the left, on you big YouTube channels stating, "Oh, Trump, the walls are closing in. Trump is engaging in an unconstitutional practice." He routinely wins close to 94% of the time. The Supreme Court in the past, year and a half? 2 years. I think this might be the past year and a half. 93.7% of the time. Let's listen to why Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts and the Supreme Court has routinely sided with President Trump. It's because Democrats, they can't use Congress. So you'll hear Justice Barrett in a second. They don't use Congress because they don't have Congress, but they also don't want to run on, for example, impeding or reforming current immigration laws. They would rather just say Trump is a tyrant for actually enforcing immigration laws. But let's continue here. This is Amy Coney Barrett. Check this out.
When a court concludes that the executive branch has acted unlawfully, the answer is not for the court to exceed its power to. Some of your colleagues, including Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, said that reasoning was a, quote, existential threat to the rule of law. I mean, that obviously got a lot of attention, that whole back and forth. And your response to her?
Yes, let's see. I do want to clarify that I was writing for the court. I always feel funny about saying, I was representing the court, so it wasn't just my own opinion. But I was the drafter of the opinion. And I think that Justice Jackson and I just had different views of the judicial power. Mine narrower, or the court's rather, narrower than the one that Justice Jackson presented. I hasten to add that Justice Jackson and I get along just fine. Justice Scalia used to say, I attack ideas, not people, and that's my motto too. So we were sparring about ideas. It was not personal. But I do believe that. I think the judiciary needs to stay in its lane.
And she wrote a solo.
The judiciary needs to stay in its lane. Federal judges, number one, do not decide foreign policy. They don't decide national security. They don't decide what is and isn't an emergency, a national emergency. And so what happens is you have federal judges looking at immigration cases, looking at trade, looking at all different types of topics from a liberal Democrat point of view. But flooding the country full of undocumented human beings is not an emergency. It's not a national security. Allowing millions upon millions of human beings to come into the country without documentation is not a national emergency or a national security risk for Democrats. They do not see it that way. Allowing American manufacturing jobs to cease, to just simply disappear and vanish, and outsourcing everything is not a national security issue for Democrats. I'm not being petulant or belligerent. This is the truth. They don't see things in the same way as a person who votes for Trump. A person who votes for Trump wants manufacturing to be rebuilt in the United States of America, wants immigration laws to be enforced. These are just two topics. They want illegal narcotics, the flow of these substances, to be impeded or stopped. The federal judges who said Trump's tariffs were illegal did not view the inflow of these substances to be a national emergency. If you could believe that. They said, oh, well, it's a negotiating tactic. But it is a national emergency. You have tens of thousands of Americans losing their lives, 70,000 plus 2 years ago. And so Democrats pick and choose what they want to be apoplectic about. And when it's something that they find, well, these are just the way we see things. This is the way we would view this topic. So a federal judge looks at these national security issues and says, not national security. Trump is trying to grandstand. But the federal judge doesn't have the right to decide what is and isn't national security. The president does. And Congress can stop Trump through laws. But Democrats don't want to run on weakening immigration laws. They don't want to run on literally reforming the laws they claim are despotic. That would be too logical, and it would also be bad politics because they want to win back the House. But anyway, let's continue. They know that the core of the current Democratic Party's value system is not popular nationwide. The reason, two of the biggest reasons President Trump won, well, the most important reason is he wants to stop endless wars. He doesn't want us to get into endless wars. You can have, the rebuttal to that, but he's not a pacifist. He's an American president, but he's the most anti-war president we're going to get, or that we've had in a long, long, long time. And that doesn't mean he's a pacifist. But anyway, let's continue.
Correct.
Are you tired of
You responded in an interesting way. They got a lot of attention. You clerked for the late Justice Antonin Scalia, who was known also to have a pretty sharp pen at times. When it comes to your point of view and style, how do you see comparing or contrasting to Justice Scalia?
It's hard for anybody to compare their writing style to his because he was such a fantastic writer. So I'm sure, my writing does not hold a candle to Justice Scalia's writing. In terms of the heat, he was Italian, so I think he had naturally brought a little bit more heat to the pen. So I calibrate mine to the situation, and in that particular opinion, I was writing, in a little bit more of a forceful or, shall we say, spicy way than maybe I sometimes do.
But as far as your point of view about the Constitution, a constitutionalist, the text, explain that for folks.
So,
in that way, you're close to Justice.
Oh, yeah, of course. In terms of philosophy, I did. I learned from Justice Scalia. And in terms of philosophy, my philosophy tracks his. And that is that the Constitution's text controls, and the way to understand what the text means is to ask how it was understood by those who ratified it when it became law.
And for the folks who say, well, the founders were dealing with completely different problems back then. They were not contemplating what a country could look like decades later. How do they want a living, breathing Constitution that changes. How do you respond to that?
The genius of our Constitution, and I talk about this in the book when I describe originalism and describe our written Constitution, is that it's written at varying levels of generality. So sometimes it's very specific. The president has to be at least 35 years old. But sometimes it's very general. We're protected from unreasonable searches and seizures. We have freedom of speech. And to have freedom of speech doesn't mean that you have freedom only to pass out pamphlets in a town square. I mean, it means that you have freedom to be on broadcast news.
And yet we didn't have freedom of speech when the Trust and Safety team worked along at then Twitter, before Elon Musk took it over, worked alongside the Federal Bureau of Investigation under Biden's administration. Anyway, and even before Biden's administration, ladies and gentlemen, 93.7% of the time, the Supreme Court backs President Trump. Democrats in 2016 did this to themselves. They cheated Bernie Sanders, had top secret intel on Clinton's servers, then wondered why they lost, then blamed Russia, then lost again after kicking out Biden for Harris. They don't even have functioning primaries. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. The Supreme Court is backing Trump all the time. Thank God.